So just 2 weeks after Xi Jinping, the president of China, visited with Vladimir Putin, it seems like the friendships that were bolstered, at least in public, there are not as what they seem. This comes because the Chinese ambassador to the European Union, Mr. Fu Kong, downplayed the no limits friendship between China and Russia, stating that China is not on Russia's side in the war in Ukraine. He also went on to say, quote, China does not recognize Crimea as Russian, and they don't recognize other territories of Ukraine that were taken by the Russian Federation. According to Mr. Kong, the previous statements about this no limits friendship, quote unquote, between China and Russia is merely a rhetorical device. And this is a direct quote. He says that the no limits friendship between China and Russia is merely a rhetorical device, nothing more. That means that outside of just speaking about it, nothing more is taking place with regard to their friendship. There's no additional benefits, there's no treaties, etc. It was just, as he said, a rhetorical device. He also suggested that critics have misinterpreted China's relationship with Russia and that their ties may not be as limitless as their leaders had declared previously. What this sounds like is it sounds like Xi Jinping went to Russia, got a bunch of concessions with regard to energy transfers as well as economic ties, all the things that China wanted out of Russia because China came in from a position of power with regard to what Russia needs in a partnership on the global stage. And once China exacted those concessions, Xi Jinping gave Putin a smile and a handshake and then left and is now pivoting to the European Union and the United States, trying to placate them. And the reason he's doing this is because French President Emmanuel Macron and the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen are heading to China, where they're going to discuss trade ties. And the reason that this concerns Xi Jinping is because both the European Union and the United States are pressuring China to limit its support for the war in Russia, or between Russia and Ukraine. And the reality is the Chinese are not providing equipment, but it has been discovered that Chinese ammunition has been used by the Russians in Ukraine. The question is did that ammunition go before the war started, therefore was perfectly acceptable, or did it come to Russia during the war after sanctions and warnings were put in place? It's just quite fascinating that Fu's statements indicate that China's relationship with Russia is largely just a surface level relationship, and it definitely is not as strong as they once believed it to be. And China is trying to position itself as a mediator rather than a partisan supporter at this point. And the reason I think that these statements are the relative truth in China is because these ambassadors, such as the ambassador to the European Union, they get their marching orders for media, for meetings with officials, etc., well in advance, and it is a very scripted message. They do not want to go off message to embarrass China. They don't want to go off message to embarrass Xi Jinping. So when the ambassador to the European Union from China says these things, it likely means that he was given authorization to say these things. He didn't go off script and kind of go rogue to discuss what is outside of the realm of Chinese policy at this point. And as I said, I think it's because China got what it wanted from Russia at this point and knows that Russia is the weak partner in the bilateral relations here, and now wants to shore up its relations with the European Union and then potentially the United States, where those two make up the vast majority of Chinese trade. So just a very interesting comment that came out of the Chinese ambassador, and it was not downplayed whatsoever, flat out saying China doesn't recognize Crimea and flat out saying that the no limits friendship was merely a rhetorical device. So there we go.